following the trails of caravans and duels. Some women broke free from everything that was expected of them. In today's video, we're diving into the stories of 10 of them, figures who left their mark on the harsh landscape of the Wild West. Get ready to uncover the details of their heists and the daring escapes that turned them into legends. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and drop a like. Let's go! Number 1. Pearl Hart. Ever wondered how someone turns into a legend in the Wild West? Pearl Hart is one of those names that has stood the test of time, sparking curiosity and controversy wherever it's mentioned. Known as the Bandit Queen of Arizona, she made a name for herself robbing stagecoaches, something few dared to do. Her story took off in May 1899 when Pearl, struggling to provide for her child, teamed up with Joe Boot. Together they planned a robbery along the route between Globe and Florence. To avoid being recognized, she dressed as a man and managed to steal $418 from the passengers. But in a surprising twist, she gave each person $1 back so they could buy food when they reached town. That unexpected act only added to her growing air of mystery. The thrill didn't last long. Joe Boot was sentenced to 30 years, while Pearl got 7 for stealing the stagecoach driver's gun. While in prison, she made a short-lived escape, allegedly with the help of sympathetic guards, but was quickly recaptured. During her time behind bars, Pearl became pregnant, which led the governor of Arizona to grant her a pardon in 1902. After regaining her freedom, her story took an uncertain turn. Some say she performed on stage, capitalizing on her fame. Others believe she chose a quieter life with a rancher named Calvin Bywater. The truth is, no one really knows where Pearl Hart ended up. Did she finally find peace, or was she still chasing new adventures? Either way, her legacy keeps people talking, proving that in the Wild West, nothing was ever as simple as it seemed. Number 2. Eleanor Dumont. Imagine stepping into San Francisco in the 1850s, just 21 years old, and earning respect in one of the toughest fields of the time, gambling. That was how the journey of Eleanor Dumont began. Originally from New Orleans, she quickly made a name for herself at the blackjack tables. It wasn't just her skill with cards that drew attention, but also the way she ran the game and handled the daring souls who went up against her. After making a name for herself at the Bella Union Saloon, Eleanor was accused of cheating, a scandal that shook her reputation. Without hesitation, she moved to Nevada City, where she rebuilt her image and continued to impress local miners. Not just with her mastery of cards, but also with the charm she brought to every game. For a while, it seemed like she was in full control of her own destiny. But everything changed after one fateful encounter. In Carson City, Eleanor met Jack McKnight, a man who deceived her by selling off her properties and disappearing with the money. Betrayed and furious, she sought revenge and ended McKnight's life. That moment marked the beginning of a dark chapter. The nickname Madame Mustache, given to her because of a faint mustache on her upper lip, started to stick, and the luck that had always been by her side at the tables began to fade. As time went on, the reputation Eleanor had built was replaced by hardship and deep melancholy. In 1879, after a series of losses and personal struggles, she mixed wine with morphine in a final, desperate act. And just like that, the story of a once brilliant dealer came to an end. One who had reached the peak of success, only to experience the bitter taste of betrayal and tragedy. Number 3. Lillian Francis. Imagine a 14-year-old girl who, instead of following the usual path for her time, decides to jump into a world-famous show. That was the beginning of Lillian Francis Smith's journey when she joined Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, and immediately took on the character of Winona, a Native American princess. But this wasn't just an act. It was her way of showing she was determined to push back against the restrictions placed on women in the 19th century. While Annie Oakley was more reserved, Lillian had a bold and sometimes provocative attitude. This difference in personalities fueled the rivalry between the two sharpshooters, and the tension eventually led to Lillian leaving the show. Still, she didn't give up performing. She kept touring across the U.S., always bringing something new to her sharpshooting displays. At the end of her life, Lillian made one last statement of independence when she was buried in Sioux attire in 1930. That final act summed up her journey, not just as someone who aimed a rifle at a target, but as a woman determined to break barriers and redefine expectations in an era full of limits for those who dared to stand out. Number 4. Rose Dunn. Imagine going back in time and meeting a young woman who, out of love, risked everything, dodging bullets to help an outlaw. That's the story of Rose Dunn, better known as the Rose of Cimarron. She grew up in a family with a shady reputation and was introduced to the world of crime through her brothers, who had ties to the infamous Dalton gang. In that world, Rose met George Bitter Creek Newcomb, and their relationship changed the course of her life. In 1893, during a heated shootout in Oklahoma, Rose made a bold move that put her in the spotlight. She ran straight through gunfire to hand Newcomb a rifle. That daring moment became a symbol of her loyalty, but it also set off a chain of dramatic twists. Just 2 years later, her own brothers betrayed Newcomb, turning him over to the authorities. He was killed, bringing their love story to a tragic end. Shockingly, Rose's life took a completely different turn. After living on the edge with an outlaw, she married a powerful Oklahoma politician. That marriage brought her a peaceful, stable life, far from the dark and dangerous world she once knew. It was a defining moment that reshaped her path, replacing risk with security. Rose Dunn's story is proof that the choices we make and the people we surround ourselves with can completely change our future. Number 5. Kate Horany. Have you ever heard of Kate Horany, also known as Miss Doc Holliday? Her story starts in Hungary around 1850, when her father worked as a surgeon for Emperor Maximilian. Everything changed when the emperor was overthrown, forcing her family to start over in the United States. In Iowa, Kate suffered heartbreaking losses. She lost her parents, and later her husband and child to yellow fever. With no clear future ahead, she decided to rebuild her life in Dodge City, a town notorious for its lawlessness and constant clashes. There, she crossed paths with Wyatt Earp, one of the most legendary figures of the Old West. That meeting led her to Doc Holliday, the dentist-turned-gunslinger who would become her longtime companion. Their relationship thrived under pressure. One day, Doc landed in jail after a fight broke out over a card game. With no time to waste, Kate pulled off a plan that most people wouldn't have dared to try. She started a fire to distract the authorities, then boldly confronted the jailer. Her risky move worked, and Doc walked free. Later, the couple moved to Tombstone, where the infamous shootout at the OK Corral would take place. But fearing for Kate's safety, Doc insisted she leave town just before the fight. That separation marked the beginning of the end of their relationship, though the loyalty they shared remained a lasting memory of those wild times. In the final chapter of her life, Kate found peace at the Arizona Pioneer home, where she lived until the age of 89. Reaching such an old age after everything she had been through proved just how tough she was. Though history often remembers her as Doc Holliday's partner, Kate Horany carved out a legacy of her own, filled with bold choices, twists of fate, and a resilience that made her a name worth remembering in the history of the Old West. Number 6. Etta Place. Imagine going back in time and coming across a woman who, at the turn of the 20th century, chose to break the law and earn her place among the most notorious outlaws of the Old West. That's where the story of Etta Place begins. Often called the Queen of the Outlaws, her origins remain a mystery. Some even speculate she was connected to another famous figure of the time, Ann Bassett. Etta's story takes off when she teams up with two legendary partners, the Sundance Kid and Butch Cassidy. While they were busy robbing banks and trains, she played a crucial role, managing the horses that made their quick getaways possible. But she wasn't just in the background. Accounts suggest that Etta was fearless, outsmarting pursuers and even guarding the gang's money all on her own. In a world filled with constant danger, she stood out for her independent and strategic way of handling every challenge. When the trio fled the U.S. and went into hiding in Argentina, Etta proved that her courage knew no borders. Even in unfamiliar territory, she took part in a daring bank robbery, showing that the outlaw spirit of the Wild West could thrive anywhere. But the adventure eventually took a dark turn. Legend has it that Sundance Kid and Butch Cassidy were killed in a shootout with Bolivian soldiers. leaving behind a question that has fascinated historians and storytellers for decades. What happened to Etta Place? Some believe she met the same tragic end, while others think she took the opportunity to vanish and start a new life back in the U.S. The mystery lingers. Did she trade the adrenaline of heists for a quiet, ordinary life? Or did she continue chasing adventure somewhere else in the world? Number 7. Pearl Devere. Have you ever heard of Pearl Devere? Her life is a deep dive into the Wild West, full of twists and turns that show how courage and ambition can shape a person's fate. Today, let's unravel the story that started in Chicago, passed through Denver, and found its dramatic end in Cripple Creek. In the late 1870s, Pearl left home in search of new opportunities. In Denver, she became known as Mrs. Isabel Martin and offered companionship to lonely men arriving in town for work. She built a successful life for herself, but when the silver crash of 1893 hit, she was forced to rethink her strategy. That's when she moved to Cripple Creek, the heart of a gold rush that attracted all kinds of people. Pearl opened a brothel in the red light district, and before long her business stood out, not just because of her wealthy clientele, but because of the way she treated the women who worked for her. She prioritized their safety and well-being, which was rare at the time. Meanwhile, Pearl's family back in Indiana believed she was making a living as a seamstress. She worked hard to maintain a respectable image. In 1895, she married industrialist C.B. Flynn, thinking it would bring her the stability she wanted. But disaster struck when a fire destroyed both her brothel and Flynn's factory, wiping out their businesses. The marriage didn't survive the setback, and Flynn left for Mexico, leaving Pearl alone in Cripple Creek. Instead of giving up, she built a new establishment, the Old Homestead. With extravagant parties that drew attention, Pearl became even more well-known. But her priority remained the same, ensuring that the women in her care could work with dignity and security. Then came June 1897. After a lively party, Pearl struggled with insomnia and took laudanum, a common remedy at the time. The next morning, she was found lifeless in her room, bringing a tragic end to a story of boldness and determination. Number 8. Laura Bullion. Have you ever heard of Laura Bullion? She grew up in the shadow of her father, Henry Bullion, who had a reputation as an outlaw. At just 13 years old, she decided to follow the same path and teamed up with Ben Kilpatrick, also known as the Tall Texan, and William Carver. Both were part of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid's gang, famous for their carefully planned heists that made headlines across the country. Laura wasn't just running small scams. She played a key role in forging documents to pull off major robberies. One of the most notorious was the Great Northern Train heist in July 1901, where the gang walked away with a hefty sum, $60,000. But their lucky streak didn't last long. Shortly after, Laura was caught with $8,500 in counterfeit bills and ended up serving 2.5 years in prison. After her release, she left the outlaw life behind. She kept a low profile and passed away from natural causes on December 2, 1961. Her final years were spent in Memphis, Tennessee, far from her former partners and the dangers that once defined her life. Number 9. Sally Newman. Imagine living in a time when the frontier was a place of constant danger. That was the world Sally Newman was born into in 1817, in the state of Illinois. From an early age, she faced the harsh realities of life in the West, as her family set out in search of new land. By the time she was 6, Sally already understood that survival depended on quick action. One of the most defining moments of her childhood came when a stranger tried to break into her family's cabin. Without hesitation, Sally's mother took him down in a brutal way, a scene that stuck with her forever. As she grew up, Sally learned to face every challenge head-on. One time, when a threat had the neighbors terrified, she demanded that one of them hand over their weapon. If he didn't have the guts to act, she would take care of it herself. That fearless attitude would go on to define her reputation. By 1833, as an adult, Sally married Jesse Robinson, a man respected for his ability to handle conflicts with Native American tribes. It seemed like the start of a stable life, but after 10 years, the marriage ended. Robinson would be just the first of several husbands, and each of their stories ended in a strange and untimely way. George Scull was her second husband, followed by John Doyle, and finally, Isaiah Watkins. One by one, they all died under mysterious circumstances, leaving the community suspicious of Sally's involvement. Around campfires, her name became something to fear, with parents warning their children, "Be careful or Sally Scull might come for you." With each death, the mystery surrounding her only grew, turning Sally into something of a legend. Some saw her as a woman who had lost everything and chosen a path of no return. Others believed she was just the subject of exaggerated frontier stories. But the legend didn't end there. According to rumors of the time, Sally's own story came to a brutal end, betrayed by her last husband, who, driven by greed for her fortune, supposedly killed her. And just like that, a life filled with danger came to a close, but not without leaving a deep mark on the imagination of the Old West. Number 10. Sadie Marcus. Have you ever heard of Sadie Marcus? If not, get ready to meet a woman who followed her heart, even when everyone told her to give up. It all started when she was 17. She left behind a comfortable life and joined a traveling theater troupe. The stage won her over instantly, and Sadie threw herself into the thrill of performing. From there, fate led her to Tombstone, Arizona, a town full of shady stories and whispered secrets drifting through its dusty streets. That's where she met Johnny Bean, a charismatic man with a past that didn't exactly scream reliability. But Sadie believed he was worth the risk. What she didn't expect was to cross paths with Wyatt Earp, one of the most legendary figures of the Old West. Against all odds, the two grew close and started a romance that would come to symbolize loyalty and bravery. For Wyatt, Sadie wasn't just a fleeting love. She became the partner he had always wanted by his side. Sadie went from being an outsider to a key figure in Tombstone. She had a spark that made her unforgettable wherever she went. And even with Wyatt's unpredictable life, constantly facing challenges and moving from town to town, Sadie stayed by his side. Their relationship endured the chaos and lasted until Wyatt's final days in 1929. In the end, what truly sets Sadie Marcus apart is how she defied the expectations of her time. She lived life on her own terms and never backed down from obstacles. Her love story with Wyatt Earp stood the test of time, surviving the hardships of an uncertain era. And that's why Sadie isn't just another name lost in the dust of the Old West. She represents the strength of those who keep moving forward, no matter what the world says.